When you're a young kid working in the family business, you tend to get stuck with the unlikely jobs.
I'm 16. I was in charge of procurement and design for the warehouse. How many companies would let their teenager lay out their new facility for them?
I didn't realize it, but my grandfather was not driving it home. I drove it home. And so I drove it all the way from Roanoke. I would have been 14.
The Hallebrand rear ends we carried, they were really clumsy to store. So I would carry the Hallebrand rear ends up a ladder and store them in the bar joists.
Welcome to What Moves You, a Speedway Motors podcast telling the stories behind the cars and the people who build and drive them. I'm Joe McCullough. For this special 70th anniversary episode, we're diving into the story of Speedway Motors. Speedy Bill and Joyce Smith started in a tiny 400 square foot building and built the rest on passion, hard work, and family. Carson, Craig, Clay, and Jason, their 4 sons, learned from their parents and carry that into who we are today. Jason passed away in 2021, but we continue to celebrate his passion for racing and dedication to our customers. In this episode, we talk to Carson, Craig, and Clay, who grew up alongside Speedway Motors. First up is Clay. He has a passion for cars and business and a knack for connecting the right people at the right time. His leadership keeps all of Speedway Motors running like a well-oiled machine. He starts us off with the most important thing to our company: you, our customers. What would you say is the most important thing we've done as a company?
Well, you look at our customers first, because we've always been customer focused. We've helped our customers fulfill their dreams. For speed, racing, or sport, or hobby. We were the conduit that allowed them to take a vehicle from what it was to what it could be. So that's probably the most exciting part of the business. It's a passion business. We're fortunate that we're in a fun industry with, great subject matter and interesting people.
So it's a family-owned business, but also the family has been involved in the industry since day one. How important do you think that is to the way that our business is then perceived by the customers?
Well, it's really differentiating because, we have been active industry participants our whole lives. My dad, he had the easiest job because he was a user. He was a racer, he was a hot rodder. And so all he had to do is think, what did I need? And I had to go figure out how to build what I needed to finish my project or to start a new product line. So it was really just meeting customer needs that are industry needs. My brothers and I were all involved in racing through the years, and I think that hands-on personal experience makes a difference. And being a family company, until you're in one, you don't really feel the benefits of being in one, because it's, you get a big hug every day when you come to work, and it's fun. And if there's issues, there's somebody that you can talk to that cares passionately about making things right for the employees, for the customers. Our customer service has always been focused on making sure we do the right thing at the right time for the customers, always. And when someone has a bad experience, it just doesn't get filed. Somebody calls them, they email them, they find out, how can we make it right? And it really makes a difference. Probably one of the things I'm most proud about was just how my dad, we would go through an airport on the way to PRI or SEMA, and we'd get stuck in Denver or Chicago for a couple hours. We're walking through, people would recognize Bill because of his black hat. And we've all been somewhere where we've seen somebody that's, famous or infamous. And would you ever go talk to him? No, you just let him walk by. People would come up and want to talk to Bill. Why? Why was that the case? It's because they knew he was one of us. They were a customer. They had either met him once time before or at least knew of him because of his hat. And they always felt comfortable enough to come up and say hello. So, our customers are much like our employees. They're just extended family. And we want to help them build their dreams and their projects.
I think that was kind of a two-way street with Bill. So I had just moved to Lincoln. I was a young punk kid who was into hot rods, and I was at Americruise. And I watched Bill approach a guy who had this really neat little T Speedster, and just walked up to him and said, "Hey, I think I see a few of my parts on here." And it just blew me away that he was wandering around the show looking at hot rods and approaching customers and shaking hands. You know, I completely blew me away.
He was so approachable. One of his favorite thing to do, we'd call customers back. And Bill would call them. And he'd say, "Hi, this is Speedy Bill. I saw you just got your order. I just wanted to make sure everything was okay." Well, it would end up into a conversation about his project and what he was trying to do or she was trying to do. And, you know, that, I think it resonated with people. You know, it was pre-social media, so it wasn't like you were doing it to try to create a buzz. It was just genuine. You know, he wanted to know, were we caring for our customers? And were we doing the right things always to meet their needs?
Next up is Craig. His artistic side brought character and personality to the Speedway Motors catalogs. Today, his architectural expertise drives our properties division, and his specialty is renovating tired historic buildings so people today can use and enjoy them. What would you say is the most important thing we've done as a company over 70 years so far?
Well, number one is, I think it's our passion and what we've been able to do for other people that have similar passions. Because we've been able to get them the products, innovative parts, all of the stuff to go live what they dream about and, you know, go out there and race or build a street rod or do something that they truly enjoy. And we've been able to make unique products for that, make better products for that, and also have the products on hand at competitive pricing to get that out to the individuals. And I think, you know, when you talk to them, it's been interesting because you have the racers that are really hardcore racers, and now they've gotten to where they're out of racing, but they still have this passion. And they're able to go in and then kind of move to another thing. They may want to do truck restoration or a muscle car or a street rod. And we've been home for that, so that there's a relationship you build over all those years, and they know that we stand behind our products. We have the product in stock, we're competitively priced, and all of those things make us the home that they want to come back to and buy from. The hard work that went on and just the relationships you build with not only the people but your customers, I think an awful lot of that is the legacy, and that's real important. But we continue to grow and also use innovation and continue to offer new products and new ideas and do that. And we've got such a good group in all our different divisions that have the same passion and excitement to come and do this every day. And it's the best job you can have.
Is there a specific customer interaction that you've had over the years that stands out in your memory?
Just traveling across the country saying that you're from Lincoln, Nebraska, and if it comes up that you're involved with Speedway, you know, there's so many people that we've touched that, oh, my grandpa used to buy parts from you, or this or that, and that's interesting. And, you know, also Bill's relationships with a lot of the top builders and the top people in the industry.
Carson is an extraordinary engineer and racer who's known for rewriting the rulebook wherever he goes. Today, he oversees engineering, IT, and the warehouse, creating the parts you want and making sure they arrive when you need them. As the eldest son of Bill and Joyce, he's the best one to take us all the way back to the company's humble beginnings. You know, it's the 70th anniversary. You know, we're looking back over 70 years as a company. What is the first thing that you remember about Speedway Motors? You were basically born right around the time the company was born.
Bill started the company, borrowed money from Mom. Mom had a real job, worked for the State Fair Board, and they got married in '52, and the company started in '52. And I don't know exactly, I never exactly heard the date when the company started, because I think it was a kind of an evolutionary start. There was not a birth date as such for the company. I think that was about the time Bill, my dad, graduated from Wesleyan with a degree in teaching, and his plan was to, going through college, was to teach industrial arts, and he got to do his student teaching at Whittier Junior High School, which is on Vine Street. So he was kind of put off by. He said, "This doesn't look like a lot of fun," and so he started to do what he knew how to do, and that was work on cars and wheel and deal on cars. The first I remember is 1719 N Street. We had a small building that was old. The original building was always the counter and part storage. It really wasn't a warehouse. It was shelving that was whatever we could find, the cheapest we could find it. I remember back in high school, the Hallebrand rear ends. I don't know if you've ever picked up a Hallebrand rear end. The Hallebrand rear ends we carried, we'd carry one or two of those because they were, when somebody needed them, they needed them bad, and having it in stock made it to where you could sell it. And they were really, really clumsy to store. And what I figured out is I could store them up in the bar joists. So I would carry the Hallebrand rear ends up a ladder and store them in the bar joists, because that was the best place to get them out of the way, because they took up a ferocious amount of room.
And you talked a little bit about, you came back and promised Bill that you would help automate.
Well, it was evolutionary. The challenge was we were doing everything by hand. One of the things Bill was always proud of was he always said he's never touched a keyboard. Well, for a company our size, the computer is really critical in everything we do. But he was kind of old school and wanted to do it by hand, and so there was always a challenge on the computerization process. We wrote our own programs for a while, but it took so much time, because I'd write programs at night and then work basically in the company doing company projects, designing, doing design work. A lot of the kit cars we did, I did most of the design work on, build work. Many of them I did. I was not the idea guy that said, this is what, waving your hands and saying, this is kind of what I want it to look like. I made that from a hand waving operation into a real car that you could drive and sell.
It's a family-owned company, and the family owners aren't just, sitting in their offices,
right,
clicking away on a keyboard. Like, the owners are involved in the industry too. How has that affected the business?
What it does is it makes you an expert, especially when you win. Okay, and that was over. We won a lot. The very first car I ever built was a sprint car, and Bill, my dad, Bill, told me that one of the things I had to do is get a good driver. That the driver was critical. So I went out, and Lloyd Beckman had retired. He was in his 60s, but told him we were going to race out at Eagle and Midwest at that time, and asked him if he'd drive for me, and he thought about it for a minute. He says, "Sure, but you got to have your dad in the pits." So, because he and Bill were would talk over, what was important. They worked together really well as a team. Lloyd went out and he won the first race, the very first race we ever raced. So I was hooked at that point. We won a lot of races with Lloyd, and he retired, and then I raced with Don Drow Jr. for several years, and sprint cars, same kind of thing, limited sprints, and we did really well. And so there was a new series that had started up, the AIS, American IndyCar Series, and we ran the AIS, and that's when I got hooked up with Bobby. Had heard about the series. Bobby Answer had heard about the series and was working with Robbie. And I think Robbie, I don't remember how old Robbie was. I think he was like 16 or 17 years old. And then we had Robbie driving for us. And then Al Unser Jr. was the third cousin, and he was driving Indy cars at that time. So we never had him drive for us with AIS because he was driving for Roger Penske. We were running the two cars, and when when Robbie wasn't available, Jason would drive. So Robbie started out driving the 85, and Jason drove the 86 because the 85 was a better car, easier to make it go fast. Jason drove the 86, and then Johnny came on board the next year. Jason got to drive. He did really well. Never crashed. As the race progressed, he was always faster at the end of the race than he was at the beginning. I think he finished in the top 3 once, but he was always like 4th or 5th. I mean, he was always did really well. But he was a car owner. He had to fix it, so he was careful not to crash it.
Craig is the next oldest, and he continues with the story of his first memory of Speedway Motors. Craig, this is the 70th anniversary of the company. Looking back, what is your earliest memory of being in the Speedway Motors store?
Well, every Saturday, we didn't have to worry about what we were going to do because we went to Speedway. And you had numerous jobs. From the earliest time, we swept the floors, we moved the parts around. We had no heavy equipment, forklifts or anything, or even a pallet jack. So everything was two-wheelers. So if a load of wheels came in, we were there unloading the wheels, even though if you could barely pick up the boxes. We were putting them on a two-wheeler and putting them away and doing inventory and that sort of thing. So we did things as really young kids that was a game with my mom. We would drive out to North Platte to see her mother, or across town, and we'd see a car, and we all knew exactly what the car was and what year it was, and it was almost a game between all of us. That if you saw a 67 Chevelle, you knew the difference between a 67 and a 68, or a 66. So anyway, so that was always, there was a total awareness of the whole automotive industry. You just grew up in it, and some really fun times because the race teams were getting ready for racing. There was all the customers, huge amounts of activity every Saturday, and there was the only place that you could go at those early ages and make any money. But you saved every dime because you knew that you needed to have your own money to buy your own bicycle, save for a car, because you were paying for it yourself. No one was giving anything to you. And a lot of characters and a lot of interaction between my dad and local racers and just all of that type of thing. So it was always interesting, but it was always a lot of hard work. So.
Do you remember there being a moment where you realized that maybe what you and your family were doing was different than what, like, your other kids whose parents would go to work and come home and?
Yes, because early on, Bill would go, my dad would go racing, and then a lot of times they wouldn't go back to the shop. So we had a race car on a trailer parked out in front or in the driveway. And, that created a buzz in the neighborhood. Also, he was always wheeling and dealing and buying cars. And, there were some trucks and cars that my mom had. She had a 32 Model B truck, And we had, if you weren't at Speedway working, we had another option if we wanted to go to the pool. For every hour you pulled weeds or collated catalogs, you got an hour at the pool. So she would take the 3 or 4 of us out in the back of a 32 Ford pickup out to East Hills, which was on 70th, and we went to the pool. And she also had a pair of Corvettes, and there were 2 of them, and one was a coupe, and she would load all of us underneath that rear glass, and it was always hotter than hell in that car, but we were cool because we were in a new Corvette and riding out to around town with her.
So I imagine that your experience learning to drive was also different than the other kids?
Oh, yeah, because early on, they would need to have something done or run down to and so I think at 14, before learner's permit, I was taking the truck down and doing some of that. And then at 15, my dad sent me with my grandfather to go get an Excalibur. And this was a hot rod car that was a replica of a 1934 Mercedes, but they had a Corvette engine in them, and it was quite a hot rod at the time. And he had the opportunity to buy the very first one, and it was in Roanoke, Virginia. So we flew back to Roanoke, and I think I just turned 15. I don't think I may not even had my learner's permit. And we bought this car, and I didn't realize it, but my grandfather was not driving it home. I drove it home. And so I drove it all the way from Roanoke, and I think it was in the summer, so I would have been 14. So, and then he put me in semis, and I would go and I would buy cars and inspect cars for him that he was buying for the collections all over the country. And I kind of got sent on all those adventures and was the race car tow driver when we needed to get someplace quick. I usually drove those race trucks and trailers.
So it's unique that Speedway is a family-owned company. It's also unique that the family is involved in the hobby too. How much would you say that's contributed to what you're talking about?
Well, I think you grow up in that, and it's hard to separate it. All of us boys would go with the race car anytime we could with our father growing up. And yeah, you did everything from, okay, you got to crawl underneath the car, change the quick change gears and that sort of thing. Now, Carson and Jason did a lot more of that because Carson was, early on as an engineer, he was the mad scientist that was making these things go really fast and coming up with really innovative products and ideas on this. I was buying and selling cars and still have a passion for doing some of that, and and then finding things for the museum and working constantly on the lookout on things that my parents were interested in. And Clay and I would both go an awful lot with him to auctions and with Bill and Joyce.
You didn't call Bill and Joyce mom and dad?
No. No, because you went to work and it was just always, we called them Bill and Joyce. And they also had a relationship with their grandkids, and they didn't ever get called grandma or grandpa. They were always Nana and Papa.
And finally, Clay, who joined his brothers with his first job at Speedway Motors around the age of 5 or 6. Looking back, I have to ask what your first job was at Speedway Motors.
My first job was collating catalogs, marching around the dining room table. And I probably was all of 5 or 6 years old, but Mom made a game out of it, and Bill would go to the races and would take these flyers that were stapled together, catalogs, they were flyers stapled together, But my brothers and I, we got pretty good at eye-hand coordination just because we were collating our entire lives. So that was probably the first job. But, you know, early on, our parents had the view that we really needed to work. And so we started working at a very young age. I think Joyce had us get our Social Security numbers all the same day. And I think it was like 10, 12, and 14 for the three of us. I think Carson already had his. But she wanted us to clock in. She wanted us to know what it was like to be an employee, understand that our favorite uncle took his share out of our paycheck every month. And I still remember the first paycheck, I went and said, "Where's all my money?" Because of course I did 25 cents times the number of hours and thought I was going to be rich, and then that wasn't in my paycheck. So I realized what my civic duty was pretty quickly, that I needed to share my bounty with our federal government. But early on, we probably had every job there was to have in the company, you know, from sweeping floors to restocking shelves to dusting Krylon paint cans in the lobby. I can specifically remember one Saturday where we had a muffler shop back then, and I spent the morning sorting out the different sized U-clamps. And after a morning of that, I was the shade of my slacks. I was black. Everything that touched was black because I was just full of grease. But we did shipping, we did receiving, and only until you turned 16 could you actually drive the truck to deliver the packages, because back then you had to deliver packages to the Greyhound bus depot and to Continental Trailways. But that was a fun job, being the driver to drive the packages for delivery. But we did every job.
You literally loaded them into the cargo, the luggage area of the bus, right?
Yeah, they'd see us coming and they knew there was a lot of work ahead. So the Trailways guys would take a break, and when we show up and we had to do most of the work. We were shipping so much back then that we created our own manifests. So they were all pre-printed with the sender information on it, and that cut the typing down in half. And I can remember we'd ship out an engine because we had an engine shop then. I remember we had to load an engine, sprint car engine, into the belly of the bus. And, you know, it wasn't a problem on the departure side. I just felt sorry for the agent at the other end that was trying to figure out, how in the world do I get this engine out of the belly of the bus? But, you know, those were pretty simple days back then. And it was always fun working together because every day was a new opportunity, a new challenge.
What was it like growing up with Bill and Joyce, like as your parents and as a family, and also then as your bosses at the family business?
Yeah, it's, you know, you don't know what you don't know. I mean, as kids, that was the only world we were, you know, aware of and exposed to. So you just were expected to work. You got paid to work. As kids, we were rich kids. I mean, rich. We had hundreds of dollars. But we also had enough money to buy our first motorcycles when we all raced motorcycles and motocross and scrambles and flat track. We had to buy that with our own money. The motorcycle was fine, but Mom wanted us to be safe, so we had to buy the helmet and, you know, the Bates leathers and the steel-toed boots. So there was the gear that we had to pay for in addition to the motorcycles, and same with cars. We all had cars when we turned 16, but they were cars that we had to buy. You know, early on, working with your parents, they didn't want it to feel like nepotism, so they asked us to call them Bill and Joyce, so that it wasn't, "Oh, Dad, do this for me," or "Mom, do this for me." You know, but they led by examples. They were hard workers. You know, my mom, you know, she worked full time, and then she also ran a household. You know, thank goodness our grandparents were local. So when we were little, we'd come home to our grandparents at home or to a babysitter. Mrs. Wagner was our babysitter. So, you know, Mom wouldn't get there until after 6 because that's when they closed. So it was basically 9 to 6, 6 days a week, and you worked most Sundays. Almost every day after school and middle school, I'd ride my bike downtown to work. When I got to the point I could drive down there. You know, working in a family business, we were fortunate that our parents gave us the flexibility and leeway to try to do things. And a lot of times we were successful, and other times they were learning opportunities. But I remember when I was in high school, I was a good draftsman, and I got an engineering degree ultimately from Stanford, but I was a good draftsman in high school. And we were moving from our 17th and N facility downtown to a new building. Well, we needed to lay it out because the wooden shelving that we'd built over the last 26 years was not going to make the transition to the new building. So we had to buy this modern material called gray shelving from Burroughs Corporation. I'm 16. I was in charge of procurement and design for the warehouse. Well, it made sense because I was skilled enough that I could do that work, and I'd worked in the warehouse long enough, I knew how to lay it out so it was efficient. So it was really, but when you think back to how many companies would let their teenager lay out their new facility for them and have a confidence that it was actually going to work. It was collaborative, so my brothers and I would do it together, but I was the point person. And I can still remember the guy from Burroughs Shelving from St. Louis that came up and sold us the equipment. And we're sitting in my dad's office, and I'm interacting with him, and he's probably 3 times my age. So it was really nice that your parents trusted you enough and gave you enough leeway that you could actually go and prove your success. And if you didn't, you learned a lot in the process.
You were in a position, have been throughout your career, but like at a young age to meet like legendary people in the industry. Is there one that stands out in your mind?
Well, you were impressed by a lot of the people you were introduced to because they were, famous in the industry. Dick Wells stands out for me. He was a longtime chairman of SEMA, and Dick had been back in the 50s. Dick was a counterman for my dad in the small speed shop we had. And he was recruited by Wally Parks to move out to California, and he was the first editor of National Dragster. And Dick was kind of like an uncle to us, so that when we would go to national events, to the trade shows, and Dick was an organizer. When he was here at the airbase, was still in Lincoln, and he organized the Lincoln Timing Association, not to be confused with other less famous timing associations, but the Lincoln Timing Association got all the flyboys from the Army Air Corps together, organized them to run races on the airstrip on weekends. And Dick did the same thing with the Street Rod National. So he was a true organizer. He was 1 degree connected to everybody in the industry, and he always really took care of us like we were, nephews and family. And that was really meaningful. The times when we go to the Hall of Fame events, my dad was fortunate to be inducted into the SEMA Hall of Fame quite early in his career. But there was a group that we would have lunch with, and this would be usually my brother Jason and I and Bill and Joyce. And the table was largely the same. It was Angelo Giapatroni, it was Carroll Shelby, Dick was usually running the show up front, and Linda Vaughn was at our table. And that was fun. And it wasn't just, that happened once. I think that happened for 15 years. So you had those personal relationships that were reinforced over time. And that group, they had fun together. And it was really fun to just be the fly on the wall as a young kid, watching that interaction because they were friends.
Speedway Motors started small. It began as a real mom-and-pop speed shop for local hot rodders and racers. Next up, Clay, Craig, and Carson talk about the tenacity and creativity it took to grow Speedway Motors from such humble beginnings. From a 400 square foot building to the current 500,000 square foot warehouse, formerly the Carroll Wright building that we're in today. Talk about how the company has grown like geographically over the years, like both in Lincoln and then, beyond.
To think about how it's grown geographically, you really just need to think about how it's grown. So in the early days, what was Speedway? My dad had his degree from Nebraska Wesleyan to be an industrial arts teacher. He was a great welder. So his choice was to be a welding teacher, or he decided to run a speed shop. So he borrowed money from my mom, $300 to get started. And that was just very humble beginnings. That was okay because Lincoln was a hub for activity well beyond its size because of the airbase. And up until the early 60s when they closed the airbase, he had a large following just because the Army Air Corps had guys that were like-minded. They had wheels in their head, they were hot rodders, they wanted to drag race, and they had free room and board out there at the Air Base, and they'd spend their money at Speedway Motors. When they said they were going to close the airbase, I can remember later my parents talking about, well, that was the end of the world because their customers were going away. And that's really when they pivoted to think about how do we increase our footprint out of just Lincoln, Nebraska. Because in the early days, we were a speed shop, but we were also a maintenance shop. We would work on cars. We were an engine shop, and we sold mufflers, well, and dual exhaust. So the dual exhaust business was a really great business in those early days. So when you lost your customer base, that's when we started collating catalogs and trying to hand catalogs and then later mailing catalogs out. So we pivoted from a small local retailer to a national mail order company.
Naturally, when the catalogs really took off and things got bigger and busier, we needed additional space for warehouse. And Bill would go out and make deals on different buildings. Well, as soon as he bought one, we'd have to move all the inventory in there. And we'd move the inventory in there, and he'd put a for lease sign in the front window. And as soon as he leased it, we would be moving that inventory to another warehouse. And so that's kind of how it really started, is buying warehouses and buildings and that sort of thing that would work for the company. And then as Speedway grew, naturally, we way exceeded our needs and the logistics of trying to be in multiple locations. So we moved out to Van Dorn, built a big warehouse across the street, planned to make that our home permanently. Well, through growth and continued marketing efforts and stuff, the company continued to grow, and that's when we were able to buy Carroll Wright. And with Carroll Wright, we said, okay, this is the biggest place and we'll never fail this and all this. And we got in there, and as you know, we've filled that facility. We've also expanded because of the demands in different parts of the country. We've done Arizona, we've done West Virginia, and they seem to really work because Carson, Clay, and Jason were involved in all the engineering and a lot of the sophisticated fulfillment systems. And we're really a logistics company because of what we've done with the catalog business and the fulfillment and that sort of thing. So that's an interesting piece. And then it allows us to also serve our customers better and be able to hit that overnight or at least one day fulfillment. So that's important.
And you mentioned the catalog and that its role in sort of growing the company. You were sort of involved in making the catalog what it became, right?
Yes. Well, Bill always had different advertising directors, and it was interesting because everything was done with line drawings. When I got involved, I was involved at the university taking marketing, advertising classes, and then a full curriculum in architecture. And I got involved in not only doing a lot of photography stuff, because I always had a passion for that, but also all of the early computerization systems. I came in and I brought a couple people in, and we changed everything and started photographing all of the products. It was real interesting because the catalog then just exploded because we had high quality photos, the information, we had tech people that were able to give us concise information. Our catalogs ended up being considered the Bible of the industry. And as you went across the country, you'd go into an old gas station, and there on the top of the toilet would be a stack of Speedway catalogs, because they would never throw them away because they were the best reference material you could get. And so that started a growth, and I think early on when we switched that, there were growth of 38% or higher just every year, because all of a sudden it changed the perception of who Speedway Motors was. And then one thing Bill always did is he always felt like he needed to be an innovator in product development. So he had an awful lot of products that nobody else made. And he had them as a lot of people have always said, you can't sell from an empty wagon. There was a huge commitment to inventory, and he wanted to be able to not only make those items, but also sell those items. And so as far as the marketing, he was a genius in putting all of that together. And then also it made a big difference that if you went out and won on Saturday night, you sold items on Monday and Tuesday morning, because it didn't matter what it was. If you had it on your car and you were out there winning, the other guy says, hey, I need one of those, because otherwise I'm not going to ever be able to beat this guy. So it's been interesting to see that whole thing. And it worked with the catalog development, getting that information out, and also through acquisitions. We bought the Mr. Roadster company. We bought Safety Racing, a lot of other companies that had specialty items, and we were able to bring them into the Speedway family. And that's just a few. Now we have DeWitt's involved with AFCO. We're in the shock business, and the list goes on.
You have a lot to do with the product that we sell. How do you make sure that we're creating product that our customers can use and is going to solve their problems?
We've got a really great engineering group, and our engineering team has a lot of people that have experience in different kinds of racing and different kinds of car building, and they basically make it possible to specify and design products that work well. And we talked a little bit about the racing. One of the things we do autocross. Autocross is for the muscle cars is a really great way to basically prove out that your car is going to be safe, reliable, fast, quick. We race with Robbie Unser and Allister Jr. As our drivers, run an autocross, pretty much the good guys and several other places. Done real well with that.
How did all of the racing impact the company? Like how did that affect the growth of the company?
With racing, we knew what the customer needed. We knew what it took to buy or build products that were safe, reliable, and had the performance they needed. We knew how to relate to the customer, and we almost always did really well. So it was easy for customers to look up to us and ask for advice and direction. Bill, Dad, was focused on the business. That was his primary focus, and he was involved in racing. Racing was really critical because what it did is it made it to where he knew what the customers needed. He was doing it, and he was successful, so people would come. One of the things about racing is when you're successful, people say, well, whatever he's doing, it's right. I want to do the same thing. So it was critical, and he was very successful racing. He was really proud of the fact that he had so many drivers. I'm proud of the fact that I didn't have very many drivers, because by the time I got to racing, and I started racing in '82. I got good drivers, and I luckily did not have to have very many. I got good drivers. They stayed with me. I stayed with them. Some of the drivers that I raced with we're still running with.
To see all the historical pictures of everything Carson, Craig, and Clay have mentioned, check out the toolbox at speedwaymotors.com by clicking the toolbox link on the front page. New episodes of What Moves You come out every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you like what you hear, tell a friend to listen to What Moves You on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Right next to Speedway Motors is the Museum of American Speed, a huge multi-level museum filled to the brim with historically significant cars, engines, parts, and toys from across the last century. Clay tells us why it's so significant.
So the Museum of American Speed is probably our family legacy. We're just so proud of what we've accomplished, and we're humbled by the recognition that we've received for it. This last summer, we were recognized by USA Today as the #1 attraction for car lovers in America. You know, that's pretty heady stuff because there's a lot of great museums in America. But I think when you walk through the door here, you feel the passion for the sport and for the industry. And that's what we wanted to represent. The most important part of the museum is that we're telling stories about people. It's all related to cars, but it's really the human effort, the story. They were successful, sometimes not. But the passion that people had for their sport and their industry and their rodding was really, really amazing. My dad was really the genesis, because back in the 40s, even before he started, you know, he was always repairing cars, and he was racing, actively racing modifieds and roaring roadsters in the 40s when he was in college. He'd run across a set of heads for a B block or an A block, and you know, they weren't worth anything when they were discarded by the speed shop. And so there would be a repair guy, and he'd have a bunch of junk on the you know, it's like a used beer can. You know, what's it worth? Nothing. So these guys would give him old sets of heads, and he always marveled at that, and he actually started collecting those in the early days. And it was really his own passion for honoring and recognizing the people that were behind the pursuit of speed. I mean, you go upstairs and you see a wall of 317 intake manifolds. How in the world does that happen? You know, that they're all different. Well, somebody had a different idea, and they thought they could do it better. And so he wanted a way that we could honor and recognize the forefathers of our industry that, in a way that was really respectful. So in 1992 is when the family decided to put it into a foundation. So we created a 501c3 foundation, and the museum was just part of our facility in the old facility. In 2001, we bought a building special purpose for the museum, and now we have about 150,000 square feet of display space. So if you haven't been here, please come. We'd love to show you around. And then we're in the process of adding another 90,000 square foot addition onto the building. We're proud to be the home of the Big Car Racing Association, the Model T Club of America, for the Speedster Hall of Fame, the Nebraska Racing Hall of Fame, and most recent addition is we've worked with Darryl Starbird that the Rod and Custom Hall of Fame will be relocated from his Afton, Oklahoma facility up here to Lincoln, including over 30 of his cars from his museum. So it's really a way to honor our forefathers and those that did, because they did miraculous things, and we wanted to honor them with telling their stories.
Do you have a favorite car exhibit in the museum? Are you allowed to say?
You know, they're like kids. I'm blessed with 3 girls, and I don't have a favorite because I love them all. I think there's a lot of the displays that you love for different reasons. You know, there's certain things that I'm personally attached to because it was my idea, and a lot of times you like the things that you create yourself. There's certain displays that are, you think, beautifully curated. Our midget racing display is just phenomenal because of the treatment we have in the room, the experience around the room, the diversity of the racing engines within the room. You know, it's really well done, but we're out of space, and so the addition allows us to grow that. You know, I'm the thought behind the lunchbox collection. You thought, wow, the Museum of Speed has lunchboxes. How in the world does that happen? Well, when I was in college in California, I collected lunchboxes because I never had one as a kid. I mean, humble beginnings. I got the brown paper bag with my name on it, personalized every day. But I always wanted a lunchbox, and I found that I could actually find them and buy them, and that was pre-internet. And so we had those in the lunchroom at the old building. And we moved to the new building, the lunchroom's all full of glass. We didn't have a place to put them in. And so I talked to Bill, and I said, can I put them in one of the hallways, in one of the stair towers? And it actually is nice because it's disarming for the less automotive focused visitors, that they can have an experience that they like with those, with the movie posters, with the record albums, with the toy cars, with the pedal cars. There's lots of things that are disarming. But really the engine collection is the master part of the museum, because the broad diversity of what people were able to do in early days, pre-CNC, is really remarkable. And so I think the engine collection is probably, as a collection, my favorite part of the museum, but that cuts from IndyCar all the way down to Model T and Dry Lakes racing.
And like hundreds of engines? I mean,
Hundreds
more.
of engines, rounds up to 1,000. So there's lots to see when you come to the museum.
Some might be surprised to know that Speedway Motors also has a properties division. Next, Craig talks about how this part of the business came to be. A big part of the company and a big part of what you do is local Lincoln properties and real estate. How did that all get started? Is that from Bill buying warehouses and sort of growing that way?
Yes, I'd say the initial push was to buy a warehouse, make them work for Speedway, put them up for lease, and then if they leased, then we proceeded on. When Clay came back to town, we had an opportunity to buy some additional warehouses, and Clay and I and Bill basically, well, it was input from all of us, but we started really buying buildings and that sort of thing. And it gave me an opportunity to go back to something that I have a passion for and love. And so we would take some really old bad dogs and go in and rehab them and then put them up for lease. We would lease them, and we just continue to do this. And I think we're one of the largest commercial real estate holders in the city because of this, and we have quite a number of tenants, and we have some real nice buildings in some of the areas that help define Lincoln. And then we've recently done some real large projects, including the Telegraph District. Our passion there was, those are the buildings my grandfather grew up working in, and literally was an engineer for the phone company for 47 years. We're excited. It's creating a whole new buzz. The buildings are all going up, and it ends up being a fun project. And there's a lot of stuff in the Haymarket that we've been able to do after the new arena's gone in and that sort of thing. And we have quite a number of buildings that are just opening up this fall. And moved Huddle in there and was involved in that building, and a bunch of the different hotels down there. So it's been a real fun project, and it's fun to put our signature and our style on these. Like anything, if you have a successful business, you've got options on what you do. Well, our choice, and Bill and Joyce's choice, always was to reinvest in the community.
We've heard about the beginning of Speedway Motors, growth, properties, the Museum of American Speed, but that brings up a good question. What does the future look like for Speedway Motors? Craig starts us off.
Well, I think with all the opportunities of the new different companies that we've acquired, or new products that the entire Carson and all the team have coming up with, we think that there's opportunities across the board as far as coming up with new innovative ideas. Also, continued increase, because we've got all the basis for the supply chain. We have such a commitment to the inventory, and we have such a commitment to fulfilling the same desire of immediately shipping those items out to you, so they are there before you even know it, overnight, or worst case scenario, one day. And all of the expectations that everybody has these days on anything that they're buying, but we continue to really focus on that, make those commitments, and it's tough with some of the supply chain issues. But we continue to do that, and we just see it continue to grow. Everybody at Speedway has the same passion. They're invested. It's their love. It's their hobby. And when you put all these people together and everybody's working towards the same thing, you have a successful operation.
70 years have passed. Looking forward, what do you see in the future?
Well, fortunately, all of our kids are smarter than we are, for my brothers and I. So we have a next generation that is poised to really take over the torch and carry it forward. The world of wheels is not dying. I mean, we had some strategic planning sessions. I can remember back to 1994. And in the conversation, we said, our customers are getting old. Well, that was 30 years ago. Yeah, they're getting old. And guess what? There's another group of customers with a different set of interests. And so I think as long as you can solve customers' needs in the world of wheels, there's a place for a supplier, a manufacturer, and a distributor like Speedway Motors.
How do you expect we will continue to adapt to serve our customers from a product standpoint or otherwise?
Well, the part of it is we are aggressively adding manufacturing capabilities. In the last couple of years, we've added enough really sophisticated machine tools to manufacture not quite everything that I dream of, but it's close to that. For example, I can draw something up, take it over to the machine shop. 3 hours later, what I drew is laying on my desk. I did that with a brake kit for a 56 T-Bird. The front brakes on a 56 T-Bird are not real great. So we had a Cars and Coffee coming Saturday. So Tuesday morning I measured up the T-Bird and drew up the brackets and the kit. The machine shop laser cut and welded everything up, did all the machine work I needed for it. And by Saturday, I had the kit on the T-Bird and it was drivable.
And that's now a product we sell.
Yeah, now a product we sell.
We've had a long journey from our humble beginnings, but ultimately, we know that none of it would have been possible without you, our customers. If you could say one thing to our customers, what would it be?
Well, thank you for all your support and just everything that we've been able to do together. So I think we're going to continue to try to be the very best supplier and just be involved in all of your projects, because that's exciting, you know. And we're excited about it. So I know that we're here to help all of you to do anything and everything we can do to each reach a success in anything you're doing.
Have fun doing what you want to do. Make your dream come true. And that's kind of what we try to do, is help make people's dreams come true. And there's a lot of people that cars are a lot of fun for them. You know, that's one of the things that the folks that ride in our autocross cars and realize that, you know, they could build this. You know, it's not something that you can't afford.
Thank you. Plain and simple. I mean, thank you for letting us help you meet your dreams. Thank you for buying from us, because this museum, you know, this isn't dedicated to the Smith family. You know, this is dedicated to all of our customers, because without their long patronage, this wouldn't be here. You know, we think we do a good job in serving our customers, and I think the success and growth of the company through lots of transitions is a testament to that, but it's the customers that make all of this happen. You know, we're proud of the fact that we're the oldest surviving speed shop. We went back to the 1954 Speed Mechanics magazine. They had a directory that showed by state every speed shop in America. And you go through the list, we're the only ones surviving. Well, how did that happen? Well, we had a passionate family that passed on that passion to the next generation, as we are doing with our kids, because we want to be a family business. And we made the transition from a small retail shop to a national mail order company. Then digitally, we made that transition so that everything was computerized. Then we made the transition to e-commerce. We made the transition from making nothing to making a lot of the things that we sell. So we direct manufacture here in Nebraska, Michigan, and Indiana, a lot of the parts that we sell. So we were agile enough to make that transition that we remained relevant in the customer's eyes. And the main thing is that when you're passionately involved in an industry, it's easy to see what people need, because they'll tell you. They're working on a project, they have a dream, they share that dream with you, and they tell you the problems they're having in completing it. And all you have to do is come up with a solution to solve the problems. But the thank you to the customer really is at the beginning and the end of all these conversations, because without them, we wouldn't be here.
Carson, Craig, and Clay have said it, and we'll say it again. Thank you. Speedway Motors has been around 70 years because of you. We are beyond grateful. Thank you for listening to What Moves You, a Speedway Motors podcast. To see photos and watch video we referenced in today's episode, visit the toolbox at speedwaymotors.com. Email the podcast at podcast@speedwaymotors.com. And if you like what you heard, tell a friend where to find us. Thanks for listening.